Well, Jeff Lutz, it's been another rough week for the old Tesla stock there. And this morning I listed 18 reasons why Tesla is down because that's about how many reasons people are giving for Tesla being down. I'm going to reverse that on you, Jeff. What I'd like to know is how come Tesla is up 40% in the last 6 months?
Yeah, I think you have to look at everything, relative. Obviously, coming into the election, there was concern, but Tesla put up a good Q3 print, and that's really important. And certainly in uncertain times, uncertain macro times, it's good to have a good near-term fundamental performance of your company. And then, of course, the election win, and then the tie-up between the president and Elon is all kind of perceived to open up doors to autonomy. Again, when people when people get concerned or outright complain about Elon's involvement in politics, my response is it's almost binary. None of these things are 100%, but it's almost binary that if he's not involved in reducing the regulatory burden and paving the way for things like vehicular autonomy, which today in the United States is 50 different states with 50 different or no requirements or 50 different requirements. If they don't have the requirements, they're just not going to allow it. And then you have humanoids coming right after that. And you need a world from a regulatory perspective that's ready to accept that and accept both the challenges and then the possibilities of, the massive GDP growth. And so if he's not doing that, if he does not have that close relationship with the White House, I'm not saying he needs to be doing everything he's doing and saying everything the way he says it, but that's part of the package you get. None of us can remote, nor should we be remote controlling him as well. So you have a package deal. You have to decide what you want to do with it.
All right, so now I'm going to ask you the flip side of that coin. So I haven't seen Jensen Huang out there talking stuff about politics. I haven't seen him getting involved in European affairs. And yet, after an amazing print last night, all of a sudden you got NVIDIA down 8.5% today.
Yeah.
So what's going on there?
Well, the Mag 7 is in a downdraft, and it's been in a downdraft for the last month. I think some of this stuff just happens in cyclical fashion where a certain group, and right now it's discretionary in tech, and then anything that's kind of unprofitable, mid cap and smaller cap that's kind of pre-revenue is taking a little bit of a hit. And part of that's cyclical, part of it's seasonality. But Tesla is definitely outstripped what's happening with the other Mag 7. The other Mag 7 are down 10, percent, 20%, some not at all. Like Apple's not down at all. But Tesla is certainly outstripped that. Some of that is just the beta that's on the stock, but that's obviously it's even outstripped the beta on the stock. And so you have to think that there could be other things happening. So that's when you get into the near term noise about the current quarter. And that's why I go back to my original comment about Q3 earnings. Very solid backstop, beat estimates, very, very solid, gross margins, beat estimates, very solid, great backstop for the company. And then you have Q1 earnings where the numbers just aren't good. And then you have kind of this vague guidance of, we're battery constrained for the year and we're doing this major product transition in the quarter and we're going to have a number of weeks of downtime and that's it. And on both the battery constraint and then the downtime, you don't have an analyst asking about it and trying to get more. They had their opportunity. Instead, they asked about LiDAR and then they described what features they would want in their own personal FSD drive versus asking about literally clear and present, I don't call it danger,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
clear and present issues the company said that they're up against and they didn't ask for clarity. So that's on a little bit on us as retail. We could have had maybe some of the questions could have been more voted up and say, but really on the Wall Street analysts for not asking the right questions. And Tesla, I think they're trying to get out of that call, that 90-day check-in with providing enough, as much guidance as that's reasonably allowed without over communicating.
Right, right, right. Okay, so now let's completely switch gear. Well, not completely, but Brett Adcock at Figure Robotics said that manufacturing humanoids is nothing like building a car, but is more like manufacturing consumer electronics. And I think that's a little bit of an oversimplification, but I think it's directionally correct. What do
Mhm.
you say?
Yeah, I've said this too. I wouldn't say it's nothing like building a vehicle, but it's much more like building a smartphone and tablet with the added mechanical complexity, which is gigantic.
Nothing.
And specifically for people, just for it's very precise answer. It's the volumetric density of components inside of a device. When you're building something like a 5G multi-mode smartphone that has to be 8 millimeters thick, have this nice slab that fits in your pocket. You have to get all those antennas in there. You have to get all those radios in there. You have to get all the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You, of course, have to get the processing power, memory, heat management, you name it, all the camera systems. Everything's got to fit in there, connectorization buttons. That is a packaging engineering challenge, and it's a manufacturing challenge as well from a volumetric density perspective to get everything in the right spot reliably at the lowest cost structure, because that is a very aggressive and competitive marketplace.
Right. So when you've got a car which has a much less density, but has more complexity, let's say, with regard to how things have to fit, regulations that it has to meet, being able to withstand crashes at X miles per hour, being able to fit in a wind tunnel and solve issues
Yeah.
of that kind of performance, and be comfortable to sit in. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a lot of
Yeah, it's different. Yeah. It's more of the packaging challenge. And I'll even up level it further, because sometimes this is difficult. Like, you remember your cable set-top boxes or your DVD players that are kind of, yay big? I mean, that's a consumer electronics device. It's just not as readily portable. Uh, and I've worked with companies on that. I mean, is a more exploded, less complex. It kind of, you have less volumetric density of components. You can even have through-hole components in those. And then you're right. When you get to the car, there's more components in a vehicle, and there are different challenges from a regulatory perspective. But I think people would be surprised, actually, how many regulatory challenges there are to produce and qualify a smartphone in the various geographies in the world. It's not as easy as people think, but they're different. But I agree with you. You have this product, the safety challenges are different. But yeah, so in a car, more component count, less volumetric density, more large mechanical complexity, different regulatory burden. You get to a smartphone, tablet, greater volumetric density of components, more competitive, I would say, even on the cost front. Although they're all competitive, but I would say it's really cutthroat um, on the phone front and tablet front, and just different challenges. But I think if you take a tablet or a smartphone and you try to say that a humanoid is like that, and you cut the conversation, I think it's giving the humanoid as much credit as it deserves, because in the humanoid inside of the body of that, you're going to have those volumetric density challenges, although being a little bit less.
right.
But it's the actuators, it's the rare earths, it's the construction of those very fine motor actuators. That is a significant mechanical challenge, a significant supply chain challenge, a significant long-term reliability challenge, and a significant liquid ingress challenge. Like, all these things have to be fundamentally solved for on a humanoid, on top of, you solve for liquid ingress and you solve for mechanical challenges too on a phone, obviously.
Yeah.
But they're different challenges.
Right, right. So I've always felt that it would be in between in terms of a ramp. It's not going to ramp as fast as a phone, but it's not going to be as slow as a car to ramp. But now that's given that I know absolutely nothing about how that ramp is going to look like.
Yeah.
Only based on my own experience with manufacturing, listening to you, listening to
Yeah.
others. It just seems like it's got some of the challenges of the phone. Like you said, maybe the hands might be almost as difficult as a phone, but maybe once it's solved, it may not be that hard to actually execute on it.
Um, I mean, of course, yeah, when the problems are solved, it's going to be easier. But there's a couple major challenges. One is you have to solve the raw material challenges for the actuators. You have to solve the manufacturing environment and precision for the actuators. And I believe the very fine, accurate actuators Tesla is going to do themselves and they're going to insource. And but then you have to solve the inbound supply chain because they're not going to be, I don't know what level they'll take it down in terms of supply chain, but they're still going to have some inbound supply to solve for. And then for the not so complex actuators, if they decide to put those on the outside, then they have to solve for that supply chain as well. So yeah, it's the supply chain ramp of it is there's going to be some significant complexity, and I think Tesla is uniquely equipped to solve for this challenge because they have a history of if the supply chain doesn't exist, they create it. If the process doesn't exist, they create it. If the engineering design or IP doesn't exist, they create it. Many other companies do little bits of both, but the auto industry certainly is not in a position to build humanoids. They have basically drained a lot of their kind of supply chain design and talent to build stuff co-located. They've kind of let all that go. Western Europe, I would say Western Europe and US manufacturers. But yeah, this I think Tesla is uniquely, and I would put Tesla in a good, I put them in a pretty good spot. Now there are going to be a couple of manufacturers in China. I would say probably Huawei and Xiaomi that are also going to be in a pretty good space on the hardware side. And when I say hardware, I say mechanicals and the packaging of the product. I still think they're going to have challenges bringing up the actuators, just like Tesla will, and they're certainly going to have challenges on the compute side. And I think Elon has had conversations with CC Wei at TSMC. I'm sure he's had public conversations, or at least noted with Samsung as well. All the fabs are going to have to get to a new level of capacity. That there's going to have to be the step up because right now we're building computers for cars. We're building these inference computers for cars and for data centers for kind of this low volume traffic. And now they're going to have to get inference computers built in the many, many, many millions per month kind of volume. And it's going to happen a couple of years out. It's not immediate, but they got to start building those fabs now.
Right, right. Okay. You did some posting about the injection molded body panel parts
Yeah,
on
wrote an
the
article.
CyberCab. I've talked about it quite a bit on the program since I do have a background in injection
Yeah,
molding. But I was thinking about and I didn't realize that large injection molding is something that already exists. The bumpers on cars
yeah,
are
yeah,
large injection molded parts. In fact,
yeah,
volumetrically, maybe larger than the hood and the doors, etc. But what I was curious about, and maybe you know something about this that I don't, or maybe this is completely new, is this injecting the color, on top. Do you know anything about? I mean, is this anything you have a
yeah,
background in? Okay.
yeah.
Okay. How does that
It's
work?
basically very yeah. It's basically very. I mean, there's a color, and if you have a bumper on a vehicle and if it's done if it's this in mold reaction injection molding, it also has a color injected. It's not as cosmetic and nice as what Tesla's trying to do on these body panels. So Tesla's looking for this initially this golden, this look. They want a uniform. It's across a larger flat piece of material. So I would arguably say it's going to be more difficult than a bumper because you're going to have flatness issues, and then you're going to be the other difference is you're going to be insert. I don't know. Maybe it's not a difference. You have to go application by application and look at it because I've had a million people ping me on Saturn, on the Pontiac Fiero, and a number of things. And when you double click, they're different. What Tesla is doing that's different from them is they're insert molding some metal. This is what we're speculating.
Okay.
And by the way, I would say it's on good reference that what I'm speculating is very close to what they may be doing.
Okay.
But I don't have any inside information. It's just more of like I'm seeing confirmation, but I don't have any inside information. But the difference is Tesla's going to insert mold a chunk of metal with this thing, so it's not going to be just the resin and the polyurethane color matching. It's not going to just be this flimsy piece of plastic that
Yeah.
is going to be mechanically affixed onto the chassis. They're
Uh,
going to insert mold
oh,
part of that chassis. It's going to be one piece. So you're going to see the door insert molded the metal behind it
right.
with the plastic over it with the PU
Oh,
injected in for color, and that's going to come out as one piece.
I see.
And this is all to unlock unboxed. Because
Yeah.
what unboxed is going to be is you're going to go to a cell and there's going to be 1,000, right doors. And that's the cell, and there are going to be 1,000 left doors. And all this is going to be color matched, and it's all got to be sequenced and done the right way. So when this thing comes together. So I would say that Tesla's got a lot of process work to do here. A lot of, and this is the reason why you're seeing the plastics requisitions being loaded in for Austin. That's a unique thing to see in a general assembly factory, to have injection molding plastics processing engineers
Yeah.
in your car general assembly factory. It's just you don't have that.
Yeah.
You usually have those people in your supplier industrialization team or supplier realization team that goes and works with the suppliers for that. And by the way, many of those parts I would estimate that Tesla would or are getting plastic molded are probably coming from Mexico for the U.S. in many cases. So anyway, this is going to help on many different levels. It's going to help with tariffs. It's going to help with vertical integration. It's going to help with vehicle structure, crash performance, look, and of course cost. But it really unlocks unboxed, because what's different than the Saturn and the Pontiac Fiero, first off, they're different materials. Like the Saturn is thermoplastic. It's a different material. It's painted in a paint booth as a one complete vehicle to get that continuous look, and then it's mechanically affixed to the housing. It's not insert molded together.
Yeah.
So it's a different thing. It's a different animal. These aren't, this is a different, completely different thing. Again, this is insert molded with the metal of its choice. And is it going to be stainless? Is it going to be aluminum? Is it going to be, knowing Tesla, and that's what I wrote in the article, probably be this hybridization approach of aluminum in some areas, stainless in other areas, could be magnesium in other areas for weight. So we'll have to see. But this is how they're going to get to the cost structure and how they're going to unlock unboxed.
Wow.
You can't
Wow.
do unboxed. You can't, if you don't have these things individually painted,
Right.
processed, and
Right.
ready to assemble, you
Right.
can't do unboxed.
Yeah. Okay. So on the paint, will it give the kind of luster that we're used to on a car on polyurethane paint? And second of
No.
all, it won't be the lustrous kind of thing. So it's going to be more of a flat look.
Well, I mean, they can inject metal particles. There's things that they can do to give it
Right.
more of a textured look and a nice look. There's things that they can do. I don't know what was at the We Robot event. I mean, some people are saying it looked like it was a wrap. I mean, just to have the kind of look.
Right.
So I don't know what was actually at the We Robot event. I think they're beyond prototype. In my opinion, they're probably beyond prototyping stage, and they're into the phase of like getting this thing scaled up. That's why they're hiring
Right. Right.
the people. So I think they think it works, but now the challenge is to get it at scale. So when I hear people saying that, oh, I think the affordable vehicles are actually cybercabs with steering wheels, I would be a little bit concerned with that, because number one, it's going to be costly in the beginning. It's going to be very low supply in the beginning. I think they need the entire portion of this year to get this process dialed in and get it up to scale. That doesn't mean that they're not going to produce
Build some. Yeah.
hundreds and maybe thousands of cybercabs
Yeah.
in the process
Yeah.
of getting to start a production. But to say that it's production worthy and ready for mass production volumes next year, I think it's going to take them the greater portion. This is just my speculation. I have no inside information.
So your speculation then would be that the Model Q, if you will, is going to be more like a Model 3 or Model Y in terms of the methodology for constructing it, a shorter version, a smaller version, whatever.
Yeah, I'll give you my direct
Okay.
feedback on it. I believe that that vehicle is going to borrow the battery pack, the motors and inverters, that tech, and anything else, any other modules it can grab from the future unboxed car, because those modules had to ramp early anyway. And they had to be in production anyway. And they're lower cost modules. These are the things that they presented at Investor Day. So I think those modules are going to unlock the price point for the new lower cost vehicles. I do think that there are going to be some other trade-offs in these vehicles. You even heard Lars kind of reference like, hey, we're trying to maintain, like when you step into a Tesla, it's still fully featured. It still gives you, you don't feel like there's a bunch of compromises. And I don't think any of us thought, not having a rear screen was a compromise 2 or 3 years ago. So it may be things like that. So we'll have to see. But my direct answer on these vehicles, I think it's going to borrow modules from the future platform, as many as they can to get the price point down. I believe it's going to be a miniature version of the Model Y and a larger version of the Model Y. I think they're going to build on that and the success of the Model Y. I don't know what they're going to call it.
Yeah.
I'm not a branding person. I'm not a marketing person, but I am a supply chain person.
Yeah.
And if you can start platforming all the components that goes in these things, and they just have different body structure sizes, then you can really capitalize on the cost efficiency. And the other clue they said is they're going to use the Model 3 and Model Y lines
Yes.
to do this. And those lines are they're interchangeable, but you have to do a changeover, but they're constructed, they're in a similar manner. It's just different fixturing on those lines and obviously different robotics programming, but it's going to be that style line. So that's why I think it's going to be more of that style of vehicle. Of course, now you see the new Model Y, you see the new rear styling, you see the new front styling. So they already have that established. Why not capitalize that and say, okay, this is the best selling car in the world. We're going to make a larger version of it, and we're going to make a smaller version for people that want a smaller one. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it's true or not.
We'll find out someday. So you also posted today that you are not that excited about BYD among the Chinese players, that you wouldn't even put them in your top three in terms of the companies that will be at the top of the game. Yeah, I guess you were suggesting 2-3 years from now, it won't necessarily be BYD that's the big winner.
Yeah, I mean, first off, BYD has done a lot of good things. They have an incredible battery business. They have a decent components business. And of course, they've built hybrid vehicles and now EVs in volume, and they should be commended for that. And they're up and down the price spectrum, but above $30,000, everybody should be clear is they don't compete with Tesla, meaning they put product there and they get annihilated by Tesla. So in the price tiers that Tesla competes, Tesla beats BYD internationally and in China. There's not a question on that. So I don't view them as and I think I've talked about the days of payment terms, the issues that they're having within their supply base. I get read every kind of story. Like people act like I've never worked in supply chain in China or here, and I get every story in the songbook about what's happening. I know what payment terms are typically in the U.S. and I know what they are in China. I know Tesla in the U.S. I know Tesla in China. BYD's 3 times that. Yeah. And if anybody thinks that it's not only that they started their company that way and that's how they structured their relationships with their suppliers, they grew to that every year over the last 4 years. So something's happening from a cash management perspective as they expand. They're under some amount of stress. There's talk about their debt being wildly bigger than what they actually post, and it's very difficult to get financials in China. Again, I'm not saying the whole thing is some sort of I'm not like Tesla Q or BYD Q. I'm just saying like there's problems. People should look at it, and I don't think that they compete with when Tesla decides to compete in a price tier, they beat them. But in terms of who I think the top 3 are in China, I think it's Xiaomi. I think it's 𝐑𝐚𝐧𝐝𝐲. I think Li Auto. Those 3, they are on a path to profitability. I can really speak for, I think, Li Auto and Xiaomi. Xiaomi built an entirely automated manufacturing process for their car. Their first car they rolled out, instead of rolling out 14 cars like BYD does, they roll out 1. So they're keeping the model count low. They've kept automation high, which means that they're building something that they can export globally. The BYD manufacturing process, yes, there is some automation, but there's not enough for them to be potentially profitable in other locations in the world. So anyway, they have a longer ramp to get there for sure. So yeah, I just don't view them as scalable globally. Xiaomi has proven on the smartphone side, I know them very well, that they can scale and be very competitive in Western Europe, in Latin America, and if they were allowed in the U.S., they would be competitive here as well. So I think they're the real deal. I think Li Auto is the real deal. Again, I know one of the founders of Li Auto personally, and I have faith in his abilities. And and just the team he probably established there. So I I think those are the real competitors. And again, nothing. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am taking something away from BYD, but I told you why. I mean, I think but they're certainly in the top rankings. It's just to me not my top three.
Okay. Tesla applied for their license to drive autonomous vehicles in California. That was breaking news just before we came on. And they started also hiring remote drivers in specific cities. And so, talk to me about the autonomous vehicles and license in California. But more importantly, why do they need the remote drivers to live in those cities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be some careful combination of you roll out an unsupervised platform, you are going to have edge cases that you have to get out of, and obviously you want that to be very few and far between. But you have to have some sort. You can't have cars getting stuck. You can't have people. That's an instant news story. That's an instant
Right.
problem. So you have to be ready for that eventuality. And what's nice is with Tesla, everything is training data, everything gets uploaded, everything gets resolved
Right.
pretty quickly. So it's not like I don't think they have to live with this. It'd be more of like Tesla putting this in as a safety net only to eliminate it
Mhm.
at some point. But yeah, I've heard that. I mean, it hasn't been officially announced by Tesla, but there's pretty decent reporting on that. People that research that. I also heard, I think Tesla Boomer Mama reported that Atlanta is also kind of coming very soon, or
Oh,
that's rumored or that's been confirmed. I haven't seen that yet, but anyway, they're rolling out. I mean,
yeah,
they're getting ready to do these rollouts. So all the hand waving from Tesla Cube, like, well, they didn't even apply for this or that. They are,
they are. Yeah.
and yeah, which tells me that they have to do these things at a certain time frame to get it done on time, but it also tells me that they have confidence in the release they're testing right now. Remember, they're testing probably what we will be driving in April. And and probably what we drive in April will probably start some of their early driverless testing in Texas. If I were Tesla, and I'm not smarter than Tesla, but before the June rollout, I would have some sort of friendly under NDA trial outside of Tesla employees. They're obviously doing it with Tesla employees now,
Yeah.
but you want to get it so it's, you're getting some more outside, but under NDA and getting constructive feedback on it before you do the real rollout. So if you think of all these things in some logical sequence, we're driving 13.2.8 today. My guess is they are, and we're in the last couple days of February. They're testing April stuff right now, my opinion, at various stages. They have the March stuff probably at the end of QA, and then going deeper into the unit testing process and the development process, the stuff that's probably on Ashok's car and probably on Elon's car if he ever gets a chance to drive. Would be the stuff that's probably in April, and that to me is going to be very close to them starting these trials for June.
Okay.
So we're within a couple of releases.
Yep. 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 All right. Um, the VIX is now at 21 plus. I
Yeah.
just looked, I was surprised because it's been sitting around 19 plus, but it jumped up another two today. I'm guessing that tariffs are the reason. I'm beginning to think that Trump is talking about tariffs every single day just to soften up the opposition. So in the beginning, I think it was shock and awe. Now I think it's a kind of the next level of the negotiation. It's like, no, I'm not going to give you anything that will allow you to try to outguess what I'm going to do. because I'm going to try to keep you completely off balance until we get
Yeah.
across the table from one another. Is that
Yeah.
anything like what you're thinking?
Yeah, tariffs are a negotiation, to be clear. President Trump has said, and I will be critical of him too, by the way, but President Trump has said he would actually prefer zero. Like if they want to take theirs down to zero, we'll reciprocally come down to zero. But that's a dangerous game too, because there are some categories where we have a competitive disadvantage because we never developed it. For example, in some cases, there's an EV disadvantage below $30,000. We didn't develop a supply chain for that yet. So we have to be careful on that. But in general, I agree with you that these are a negotiation. They don't have to just go on and stay on. But I was surprised that the market react. Interesting, the market reaction today versus the individual stocks. Like I looked as soon as that announcement came out about Mexico and Canada, I looked at Ford and GM, and I thought they would have been down 10%. They were up. I think some of the market is a little bit numb to it, but I do agree with you that the markets are reacting. Then you hear Europe, and I only critical thing. I think the Trump team needs to be aware of this. Like even the press conference today, it's literally at 15 minutes before market close. It's like the first question from the press is about tariffs,
Yeah.
and if he's not getting a question, he's talking during market hours about tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he's sensitive and he does care about markets, but in general, it's causing, some index issues. I mean, the S&P is down, I think 5% from its high. The Nasdaq's down 9%. Who knows how much more there is to do? Maybe the bloodletting is close to being done. We're at the last day of February tomorrow. We'll see. It's hard to predict markets, but it's the tariff talk is certainly causing damage. And by the way, for good cause, we have 3 million people in the United States connected to the auto industry. And I know Ford and GM, they've probably been working on stacking inventory, which is bad for them too, getting parts over the border and so forth and scrambling. But those are all band-aids. If these tariffs go on and they stay on and they're 25% and it's the value add going back and forth over the border, you're going to have suppliers either shutting down because they don't get approval on pricing, or the business case doesn't work at the car level anymore. And so GM and Ford say, I'm not going to build that model anymore because my unit economics are busted. And then they have this whole series of cars that they actually build in Mexico. Your Ford
Right.
Mach-E comes from Mexico. Several of the GM EVs come from Mexico. Many of their ICE cars and hybrids come from Mexico. Some of the biggest product lines come from there. There's a couple that come from Canada
Right.
too. I think it's the CRV or the Honda Civic. And one of the Toyota Highlander, I believe. Some of the top selling models they're not actually made in the US, and that's actually part of the problem. Like
Right. Right.
one in three of these big three automakers, one in three of the cars you see on the US roads today aren't made here.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the question is kind of like Elon. It's you have two very unique individuals in Elon and the president. Each of them have this stylistic way of getting what they want. And it seems like for Trump, it's been this shock and awe chaos. I want to make sure you are completely off balance. I don't want you to have a clue as to how this is actually going to turn out. So he calls Zelensky a dictator. And today he's asked in the press conference, and he goes, "Did I call him a dictator?" it's like not lying exactly, more like positioning, creating a storyline that is nebulous. I mean, does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It's hard. I mean, we're not in the middle of these things, so it's difficult for us to. I mean, you can critique, I think, and I'm sure the other side can just critiques it endlessly. I
Right.
did a post about Doge. I'm like, then do your own Doge.
Right.
Do your own Doge. And then I get the response of, well, Trump's running the government. Well, there's 250 Democratic Congress people.
Mhm.
There's a minority leader. of that. And then there's 47 senators. There's a minority leader of that body. There's thousands of people in the media. There's all these smart pundits. There's many billionaires on the left. Mark Cuban, start your own Doge. Come in with your own Doge proposal. Say, Elon Musk, I want to join the team. We'll take these, we'll take these departments, and this is how we're going to approach it. Maybe even compete on cost reductions. Let's have a good American competition that everybody wants to eliminate the waste. But you know that that's not the agenda because they actually don't suggest how to move the ball forward. They just want to destroy the effort. And the effort can be criticized. Any effort on this scale is ripe for to be criticized. Elon said that they will make mistakes because they're doing it kind of, corporate Bay Area way of like move fast, make mistakes, and then fix them quickly.
Right.
But yeah, you can be critical of anything, but we don't have enough people trying to pitch in and solve for it. But yes, the president is creating a lot of chaos. It's having a short-term issue on markets. I wish every day there wasn't a literally staged mention of tariffs, but there is, and the markets react hundreds of points. This happened in the first administration. I think people should remember. I even wrote an article on this, but in the end, the max drawdown wasn't a lot, and there's pretty quick recovery. All I'll say here is, I mean, if 25% goes on Mexico, I don't know why Mary Barra and Jim Farley and whoever is the CEO of Stellantis these days are not literally have to be peeled from the ceiling of the Oval Office right now trying to get a meeting with the president. Their business is literally going to incinerate within a few weeks. I'm not being dramatic either. There are snippets of them kind of politely saying, and I know a couple of them have been in Washington trying to have these, but I haven't seen any public meeting with the president.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, which is odd in itself. I mean, because we know that the president is a fan of ICE cars. He's a fan of the big three. He's kind of kicking and screaming a friend of Tesla. It's not
you can check me on this later. I think he's a friend of U.S. manufacturing, that is the higher order bit.
Yeah.
So if we're going to make what he doesn't want with EVs is he doesn't want forced purchasing of EVs while they're made artificially cheaper. And then when you talk to Elon, he's like, well, yeah, take the subsidies off of that, but take it off of everything.
Yes.
Because there are oil and gas subsidies, and we've seen the amount of money that's been helicoptered into the big three for quote unquote EV transition. We don't really see none of their capacities have actually meaningfully grown since all this money has come in. And when I say meaningfully, I say effectively grown. Like there isn't a significant more amount of vehicles coming out as a result of many billions of dollars going in. So I think the president is a fan of U.S. manufacturing, and you can check me on this, whatever, in a couple of months. I think he's going to structure it where if you're building here, there's going to be some amount of credit or support. I think one of the senators from Ohio proposed a bill to actually rebate for auto manufacturing the labor costs. If it's made in the United States, put some sort of rebate in where the labor costs can come back to the auto manufacturer, so you actually incent. This is a problem with USMCA. USMCA, as we said, there's no you move stuff back and forth over the border.
Yeah.
Well, we're $50 an hour to build something here, whatever, $35 to $60 an hour, and they're $12 to $16. I know there's a minimum wage required for USMCA in Mexico, but it's significantly less. That's why they moved all that stuff down there.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So you just mentioned the Dow is down 4%. The S&P's down almost 5%. And the NASDAQ is down 9%. Do we get a full correction? Well, you just kind of said, you just kind of ducked that issue a minute ago, but I've been calling for this correction for, I don't know, 5 months. We keep getting this 5% deal, and then we don't get the full 10, much less the full 20. It seems as if the market was 24 times P. The PE on the S&P was 24, which is really high. It just seemed like
to historical standards, we're in a new paradigm now, new productivity paradigm. So we have to size up what that means. if everything was done off of historical norms, then everything would be predictable, is kind of my answer, and everything isn't.
Right.
And and I also, I mean, you could the bear sounds smart all the time. And I'm saying you're not a bear. I'm just saying like it's fine. You can be a bear. It's totally fine. You just have the points to debate on because
Right.
there are bears that have been calling for a recession every quarter for the last 2 or 3 years,
Right.
and it hasn't happened. We had it, we had it on paper
Yeah.
in June
Yeah.
of I think 2022. We had negative
Right.
GDP growth for 2 quarters, but we had a media that wouldn't even want to call it that, even
And it
though
was
it
and it was
was.
barely, and it was barely. So,
Yeah, it was small, and then we've had some decent recovery. But anyway, I mean, you could cry. I mean, eventually you're going to be right. Like if you're calling for a recession and you do it for 14 quarters in a row, eventually you're going to be right.
right.
It's just a matter of what did you do in those 14 quarters, and did you, were you able to maximize your returns or not? It's always debatable. So yeah, we had an inverted yield curve. We had jobs numbers today that were a little bit
A little bit rough.
heavy, like maybe 10%
Mhm.
out of whack. You've got consumer confidence numbers that are low. You've got Michigan inflation indices that are coming in higher. Now you see the 10-year coming down.
Right.
You have these Doge efforts converging. So nobody knows kind of which way is up right now. And I think that's causing some. By the way, I think a 5% 10-year would have just created. I think it could have been manageable, but it would have created a lot of pressure on stocks. I just think it would have. And so the fact that we've moved from 4.6 down to wherever we ended today,
Four
under
two six.
4.3, or
426.
yeah, I actually think that that's good. So I mean, we could just have another bout of whatever, get out of February, whatever. Who knows? I can't predicting stocks by day is, I think, ridiculous. By the way, all these people that are like trying to call and no offense, Randy, to you, it's an interesting and it's a fun thing to do, but it's hard to do and it's hard to do repeatedly.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. What I
And
keep
you're like,
saying.
oh, I saw the 0.618 fib on in 295 was it, and all of a sudden now we're whatever 282. It's hard to do. Like people should just acknowledge it's hard to do. So you have these people, you have the momentum of the stock. So the momentum is clearly heading lower. So people are like, oh, is it was at 300? Well, we're definitely going to 260. Oh, okay. Well, now it's at 2. We're definitely going to 240 or 220. Like, quiet. I mean, just nobody, nobody knows.
It's part of the fun. It's part
Yeah,
of the
I
fun.
agree.
It's like playing the
Yeah, I
game,
agree with
like
you.
watching the football.
I agree with you.
Nobody knows how the football game's going to end up, but we all place our bets, and millions of dollars are being made
Ah,
every Sunday on those bets.
correct. No, no, I agree. Part of it is the fun, but part of it is like there's people out there that are just like it's this, it's gonna end this
Right.
why. But part of it, yeah, if you're just guessing, just whatever, have fun. But man, it's hard to predict. You just have to like. I think the questions with Tesla is you have to always constantly ask yourself, has the thesis changed? Like, why are you invested in the stock? Know what you own. And if the thesis has meaningfully changed, then you could change your position. But you or I on the other side of these screens don't know everybody's risk tolerance, everybody's time horizon, but what we can talk about are the fundamentals of the company and are they intact? Have they degraded in some way? So I think the difference now to answer your first question from the beginning of our talk was like, why is the stock doing what you say? Why did it go up over the last 6 months? But why is it doing what it's doing lately? Well, those Q4 fundamental, those earnings numbers weren't great, and so there a little bit of that backstop is gone,
Mhm.
and now you have this concern about Q1. And I guess the longer term investors are like, we don't care about that. They could ship 200,000 cars this quarter. We don't care. A Model Y transition, everything's, but you do have to double click into these things and you just have to know what you own. I talked about the Model Y transition. You got to put it on a number and you just got to be done with it. It's a 25K a week runner. Is it 3 weeks for them to convert all their lines? Is it 4 weeks? Do the math. 3 times 25K or 4 times 25K. That's going to be your drop off of a 500K ish, 520K ish production number, maybe even more, 400, 500K or so. Just do the math, and it's okay to question Tesla too. Like, okay, we announced everything in this quarter. That's great.
Mhm.
how do we get more supply? How do we keep going? So yeah, it's I don't know where we started the question, but I rounded
We
up in
started the
another
question.
place.
We started the question with whether we might finally get a correction. Because I feel like in the markets you like to see that correction from time to time. It's kind of a reset. And if you keep getting only a 5% pullback, it's almost like you're you're just pushing that 10 or 20% correction down the road, or maybe a worse one might have that 30 or 40% at some point if you don't ever get some kind of back. Now, the other thing I talk about on the show a lot is about the old folks, the folks that are older than you, and even the folks that are as old as me, that now just have so much money. They've just made so much money in their homes, made so much money in the stock market over the last 4 years. We're the ones that benefited from the Biden nuttiness. If you have inflation, it's going to help people that own assets. So with
Yeah.
all that cash, with all and basically no way to spend it, everybody I know that has over a million, couple $1 million net worth, they don't know how to spend it. You can only take so many trips. You can only buy so many diamonds. So everybody's just, planning on how they're going to give it to their kids. So it's like, okay, you're investing it, you're playing in the market, but it's not the end of the world either way. So the risk on can stay longer. The risk off doesn't sound like as much fun. So people are like ready to get back in really quickly. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it's really hard to put investors on a hand, like a poker term, put them on a hand because there's so many, like you said, that
Right.
group of investors maybe acting one way. There's a lot of exhaustion. I mean, you see what's happened with crypto. You've seen, 40% drawdowns in Tesla. You've seen 25% drawdowns in NVIDIA.
Right.
There's a lot of dip buying exhaustion out there too, but it's hard to say like there's one thing. I keep going back to, yeah, there's little cracks here or there in jobs, but in general, they're strong. The Fed isn't cutting because the economy is very strong. That's why they're not
Right. Right.
cutting.
Right.
And so jobs are still, intact. Um, and spending is still intact, although we had, worse consumer confidence numbers. So, and then I look at earnings. Earnings have been good. So, I mean, it's in, if you look at the AI, if you look at what Nvidia reported, I mean, there's no cracks in what they're saying. So I go back to earnings being good. I go back to the economy being good enough where the Fed thinks that whatever our rate is now, 4.25 or 4.5, they think that rate, even though it's 2% above inflation, 1.5, 2% above inflation, they still think that that's appropriate. Tells me that, we're not on recession watch next quarter.
So we've got the consumer confidence coming down, but when asked, the only thing they mentioned was tariffs. Well, they mentioned inflation, but they mentioned it in terms of tariffs. So it seems like it's more a case of where the press, you and I have talked about tariffs until we're blue in the face on this channel, trying to help people
Yeah.
understand what a tariff really is and where it will and will not impact prices and certainly not impact inflation. In fact, the Secretary of the Treasury the other day said that tariffs can be disinflationary or even, so it's not he's not worried about tariffs in terms of inflation at all.
Yeah.
If anything, it can help the case. Anyway, having said all that,
Well, there's the theoretical and then there's the practical
there you
and
go.
the actuals.
Feels like
Yeah,
price.
theoretically, if there's not additional money supply to chase higher price goods, you won't have inflation. But the inbound pricing it could increase.
It could increase. Yeah.
What people never double click into is you have the importer, you have the exporter, you have a manufacturer. Sometimes you may have 3 or 4 people inside of the transaction, and the fifth person could be the consumer. And any one of those may have some amount of burden sharing. Some may have zero, some may have 100%. It's different in different situations in different industries. If there's oversupply of lumber, for example, well then it's going to be more on the exporter to figure out what to do with their pricing if they put the intended market in an oversupply state. If it's an undersupply state, then it's more the importers are trying to figure it out and they're trying to get it at whatever price they can try to get it in. They're probably going to pay more. So it is different for different industries. It does not 100% land on the consumer, but some of it can.
Some of it
And
can.
if there is additional money to chase those goods, then you could have some inflation in certain categories. So I do think the president is doing this for negotiation purposes. And let's see what this April, I liked what he said 2 weeks ago, which is like, we're resetting everything. We want everybody to come back first week of April with their plan on reciprocal tariffs. Every country can come back. I like that.
Right.
But instead, now we're talking about tariffs every week in between then. And I just don't understand why the plan, again, it goes back to your original comment of just trying to keep everybody
Off balance.
off balance, but he's also keeping the markets off balance too.
Definitely is. Okay. Well, Jeff,
Short term.
I think we've done it. I think that we probably have the highest content per minute program in the history of the show.
Maybe I should talk a little less.
Well, no, it was great. We covered it all.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead then. I'm going to let you go and I'm going to go over today's numbers.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Just drop a comment if there's questions or you disagree. It's fine. Be respectful. Ask a question. We'll try to get an answer. But it's always good to talk with you, Randy. Thank you.
See you later.
See ya.
All right. So how did it all pan out today? Well, what we had was a wild and crazy ride at the beginning of the day, up and down and up and down. And then the tariffs got mentioned. And as Jeff points out, then the market started to fall apart with the NASDAQ, which was almost in the green, dropping 2.78%. We have the Dow, which was in the green all day, getting down 0.45%. And the S&P, which was also kind of breaking even all day until the last few minutes, down 1.59% in the last about hour and a half of the day. Tesla similarly was green until that moment, barely, but it was green, and then it ended up down 3%. As Jeff mentioned, NVIDIA ended up down 8.48%, although it had been down all day. It started a little bit above the line, went immediately to the red, and then ended up down 8.48. So the entire Mag 7 was down. The entire Cathie Wood was down. I mean, that's the kind of day it was. So let's go ahead. I was going to, just while I was there, let's just take a look at the after hours. So Tesla is up 6.6%. A couple of like that would be like $1.60 or something like that in the after hours. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at how the bonds are faring. And what we've got right now is bonds down good 3.5. We're down to 4.252 again. Maybe we could go under 4.25 tonight. That would be lovely. Maybe tomorrow get back under to 4.24 something. That would be lovely. In terms of the others, we've got the 2-year down 3.6 basis points and the 1 month actually up 9.7. Now there is a weird outlier. I have no idea why. We'll just let that go for now. It's at 4.415 though. 4.415. So that means that the 1 month is now higher than the 10-year. 4.4, yes, much higher than the 10-year. So that's quite a flip in one day. There's something weird going on there. Maybe was there an auction of 1 months today? I don't know. Weird situation there. No idea why. Okay, let's go on to the oils. We have got oil down 20 cents, still above 70, but just barely $70.15. Brent, of course, not trading yet. But it's at 74. So it's roughly the normal, what's become the normal $4 spread. Natural gas up a little bit in the pre-market. It's sitting under $4 though at 3.939. Gold is down again, sitting at 2,886. That is a 2-week low for gold after playing around with 3,000. Silver also down 0.9 at 31.82, and copper down 0.69% at $4.58 and change. That is still a solid number for copper. We have got the Bitcoin, 864 up, but that is for the whole day. Okay, that's, it's continuous, 24 hours. So it's sitting at 84,649 at this point, which is, of course, very, very big time down from where it was. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the equities. Not a lot of action, a little bit, everything up. So everything bouncing. A couple of one analyst at least said that he's seeing a good day tomorrow. Some bottom scraping. Well, bottoms. This would not even be considered. This would just be kind of bargain hunting. Certainly on the NASDAQ, it would be bargain hunting because it's almost 10%. So anyway, NASDAQ down, I'm sorry, in the pre-market up 0.34%. That's 70 bucks, 70.75. S&P is up 0.18%. That's 10.75. And the Dow 0.04. So the Dow is not up nearly as much at 16 up going into tomorrow. All right, so that's where all the markets are. Last night, of course, Brian Wong was on, and it was absolutely, I keep on telling you, you want to see that one, so I'm going to give you that one again in terms of a card. If you haven't watched last night's Brian Wong video, you absolutely need to see that. Tonight, we have Cern Basher. You know how much you like Cern Basher, and we're doing, what are we doing? It's really, really good. We're going to be talking a little bit about the psychology of investing. Maybe we'll hit something about how you are as an investor as we talk about the psychology of investing, and we will also talk about the a little bit of crypto information that you might be interested in. And so that'll be at 7:45. So look forward to seeing you at that time and all the normal programming tomorrow. So it's okay if you want to join Patreon, that'd be just fine. The information is down below. You can do that quite easily. Let's see if there's any last minute things here, last minute words of wisdom. I don't know. I think that's it. It's been great talking to you.